Hello again, everyone, and welcome to another video lecture for Psych 370. My last video lecture was part of a Zoom class where I distinguished between observational learning and a few other forms of social influence. And this one is another part of that Zoom class where I'll be going over the difference between social observational learning and asocial observational learning. That distinction is interesting, but it's pretty straightforward. Basically, guys, social observational learning is what we usually think of as observational learning, and it's how I usually talk about observational learning. So social observational learning is where there is a model involved, okay? It's where you observe a model's behavior and the consequences of that behavior, and then as a result, your own behavior gets vicariously punished or vicariously reinforced. And so social observational learning is also known as the active model type of observational learning. Because again, with it, there is a model, right? There is a sort of demonstrator that you're learning from. And so all of the examples of observational learning that I've given you so far have been this social active model type. For example, the cats in that Herbert and Harsh study, they learned to do the turntable problem by watching a model do it first. Right? The monkeys on that beach in Japan, they learned to toss wheat and sand mixtures into the water because they saw a model do it first. I learned how to change the oil in my car by having a model demonstrate the process for me, and I learned not to chew gum in class because I saw a model do it and get in trouble for it. So again, the social type of observational learning is how we usually think about observational learning, right? We usually equate observational learning with the presence of a model, right? And especially until recently, most of the research in observational learning was done on this social type. It was done on this active model type. But fairly recently, researchers have also begun to explore the idea that models aren't always necessary for learning to occur through observation. So remember, we define observational learning as learning by observing events and their consequences, right? That's the definition of observational learning that you'll read about in the textbook. And guys, the wording of that definition is important because it doesn't make any reference to a model, right? It doesn't require that the observations you make are of another person actually performing or modeling a particular behavior, right? We often think of observational learning that way, but that's not how it's specifically defined. And so, guys, this definition sort of implicitly acknowledges the existence of this other type of observational learning, the asocial type. So, guys, in asocial observational learning, we still learn from observing an event and its consequences. The difference is there's no model involved, right? That's what makes it asocial. And guys, the way this type of observational learning is usually studied in the lab is by using what researchers call a ghost condition. Okay, call it a ghost condition, which is where an event that might ordinarily occur due to the actions of a model occurs anyway, even though there's no model present. Okay, so it's called the ghost condition because it sort of looks like no person caused this event to occur. It sort of looks like it occurred due to the actions of a ghost. Okay. So for example, in this study by a woman named Lydia Hopper and her colleagues, what they did was they first presented chimpanzees with a box like this that had a grape inside of it. And to get the grape, the chimps had to slide open a door on the front of the box. Now, in one condition, the chimps had to figure that out entirely on their own. Okay, and some of those chimps did solve the problem, but more of them didn't. However, in another condition, in the ghost condition, the chimps first saw the door slide open, revealing the grape, before it was closed again. Okay. Now, the door was actually opened and closed by one of the experimenters who pulled on it with a fishing line, but the chimps couldn't see that. Okay. So to them, it would have looked like the door moved, opened, and closed all on its own, right? Or as though a ghost had moved it. Okay. So that's how the ghost condition worked. And after they saw the door slide open and shut like that, the chimps in the ghost condition had to try to figure out how to get the grape. And of course, all of them did, right? So the solution to the problem had just been demonstrated to them in that ghost condition through the physical actions of the door, even though no model, human, chimp, or otherwise, had shown them the movements that they needed to make with their hands in order to get it. Okay. So that's a good example of learning by observing an event and its consequences with no model involved, right? That's a good example of asocial observational learning. And this has been demonstrated in other species too, right? So for example, there's an interesting study in your textbook of asocial observational learning in 1 to 2-year-old children, okay? And guys, the existence of this asocial type of observational learning brings up kind of an interesting question about the social type, which is basically how necessary is the model, right? So is it the actual actions of the model? Is it the motor movements of the model that we learn to imitate? Or is it the physical, environmental consequences of the model's behavior that we learn to reproduce? How necessary is the model? So, for example, I took tennis lessons when I was a kid, right? And I remember my teacher showing me how to hit a topspin serve, right? Which is kind of a tricky thing because you got to hit up on the ball. Most kids are inclined to hit down. It's kind of a tricky thing to learn to do, hitting a topspin serve, right? And I did learn to do it. I mean, I definitely learned from his modeling of how to hit that serve, right? But I'm not sure how much of my learning was due to me copying, the specific movements that he made with his body versus how much of it was due to me seeing the way the ball was supposed to be tossed, the way the racket was supposed to move, the way the racket was supposed to impact the ball, and so on. Right? In other words, I'm not sure how much less I would have learned about how to hit that serve if I would have seen it in a ghost condition where I saw the racket and the ball move all by themselves without a model being there to demonstrate. So anyway, it's an interesting question. It's one that researchers have been looking into, but it's currently unresolved. So there's not much of an answer I can give you to it for now. The more basic thing to take away from this stuff about social versus asocial observational learning is just that imitating a model is not the only way that learning can occur through observation. Sometimes we learn by observing events and their consequences, even when no model was present to cause those events to occur. Okay, well, that's about all I have to say about the social and asocial forms of observational learning. Please let me know if you have any questions about that stuff, and I hope you have a great day. Take care.